technology.
Oh, look, it enables me to do my work, so I can't really complain.
That's true. That's true.
Everyone would have to fly to Agnes Water in the middle of Queensland otherwise. I was talking to a lady in Greece yesterday afternoon.
We're live, Mary. Sorry, go on. We're live, but go on.
So I was just saying, if it wasn't for computers, I was talking to a lady in Greece last night and to somebody in Las Vegas in the morning. So, you know, you can't do that normally, can you?
No, you can't. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the show. This is my very first show that I've never intended to end up doing. It's funny how life turns out. So I think I'm going to call this The Unbelievable Truth. And my very first guest, Mary here, Mary Rodwell, who is the author of The New Human by Mary Rodwell. And she lives in Australia. And I woke up many, many years ago. And when I read that book, when I read Mary's book, it woke me up to another level of awakening and self-acceptance within myself. And I consider Mary to be a pioneer in the UFO movement and the starseed movement, if there is such a thing. And I just think she's fantastic. I think she's amazing, and I'm delighted to have her here, really delighted. It's actually my second interview with Mary, but the person, the company that produced that interview decided to keep it for themselves. So I don't think it's actually on air. I don't think you can find it anywhere. And we have a bit of a dispute, and we haven't spoken since. So sometimes things aren't meant to be, but they move you in different directions, which allows you to, where things open up for you. So there's always a positive that comes from the negative. So Mary, if you'd maybe like to start by introducing yourself. I'm so delighted you're here.
Oh, Carol, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for that. I am so delighted that any of the information that I'm putting out makes a difference to anyone. I mean, that's the blessing for me, and makes it all worthwhile. The many hours in, you know, writing up and writing a book. Anyone who's done one like yourself knows the effort that you put in, and the love and the heart that you put in, hoping that it's going to make a difference to a few people's lives or whatever. But my background is that I was trained as a nurse and a midwife in the UK. I came over, migrated to Australia in 1991. But in the UK, after I trained in the medical profession side, I ended up doing learning counselling and worked in a medical practice in Norfolk for about 5 years. And then we moved to Australia, and I decided to stay with counselling. And the reason for that was that what I saw in the medical profession was more about, it wasn't about prevention, it was more about trying to cure something that had happened. Whereas in counselling, we know that a lot of illness, 90% of illness is often stress and psychological issues that bring on the illness. And for someone like yourself in the spiritual, the metaphysical side will know what I'm talking about. But the great thing with that was I started to hear about experiences where people maybe have lost mum or dad or someone close, and they would feel their energy or see their spirit or realize that they were in, that you pass on, but you don't, your consciousness doesn't leave, that it continues. And that was something that, you know, some of my clients would be telling me. And I've always been open to what I call the weird and the wonderful. If it was unusual, I usually had a book on it, because of my seeking to understand life, the mystery, why we're here, what's it all about. You know, the big picture stuff has always been what's driven me. And of course, when I came to Australia, two things happened to get me into this phenomena, which is people who believe they've had contact with non-human intelligence, whether you call that extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, extra-dimensionals, trans-dimensionals, maybe even visitors from our future. This is more than just one thing. It's a combination of different intelligences, as you know, that are interacting with us on other levels. And what happened for me was a beautiful man who lives in England, actually now. I met him in Australia, Ellis Taylor. He's actually an author himself now of 4 books, wonderful numerologist. And he came to me and said, Mary, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, there's no support groups. For this, they just think you're a loony. And he told me about waking up with marks on his body, going up on spacecraft. His partner was having experiences. The children were having experiences. So this wasn't just him. This was the whole family involved. As you know, Carol, this is often the case, that this is often intergenerational, that, you know, if you've had experiences your siblings might have done, you know, your parents or grandparents, there's often that genetic link. So he came to me with this nearly 25 years ago now. And I'd luckily read a couple of books, one of them from a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who's now no longer with us, Dr. John Mack, who wrote the book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, which I'd read literally only weeks before Ellis walked through the door, and another one by Whitley Strieber, Communion, which was someone, and he's well known now, and he wrote the book in the 80s about his own contact, his own encounter. He's written many books since then, Transformation, Secret School, a lot of them amazing gentlemen. And so the bottom line was that with that person coming through the door, me reading those books was really to start me on this journey down this extraterrestrial rabbit hole. And I tease Ellis whenever I catch up with him in England and say, it's all your fault, Ellis. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be the weird alien lady. But he takes it well. And to be honest, Carol, it's opened my mind to so much about who we are, what we are, reality, what is reality, the multidimensional nature of who we are. All of that has come in. And the last thing I'd say about that is the research that I've done with Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, with a survey done with over 4,000 people. What we discovered was, and this is why it's so hard for people to come out and own their experiences, is only 25% is physical. 75% you are going out of body to the craft with the beings. And that is why so many struggle to validate it in you know, in everyday life, because of the fact that often as not, they're going out of body to these craft, to other planets, etc., rather than physically. And that's an important point in why a lot of people think it's just a dream. You know, they'll say, oh, I had a dream I was on a spacecraft, when in fact, most of the time it's not a dream. They've just gone in trance or out of body.
Yeah, that's very true. I was in a Zoom chat room earlier, and one of the girls there said that she'd had a dream, I think it was over the last few days, where her mum was an alien, or she could see her mum as an alien. And to me, that I don't think I got to say to her, you know, to me, I don't think I got to say to her at the time, but to me, that was real, meaning that her mum doesn't come from here, that she's from somewhere else. And I think that, you know, this time on Earth at the moment, Mary, it's, you know, as a child, I actually remember I was writing in my room and I was talking to my guides, or I was talking to someone, it must have been the Pleiadians, because I was making a list of, and I was about 8 or 9, but I was making a list of years and how old I would be at that time. And I was remembering it today. I've been remembering it for a couple of weeks now, but I was writing down how old I would be in 2012 and 2020, and all the kind of important dates, so to speak. So that's really interesting. And I think a lot of us forget having connected to them as a child. And I just, you know, the work you're doing, Mary, is so important, because you're helping to wake people up and expand consciousness within people, which is, it's, to me, it's sacred, it's huge. And I want to know if you've got any more books planned.
Don't when I was writing The New Human, I remember saying to my team, make sure that I've got it all here for the moment, because you make it comprehensive, because I do not want to write another one next year. You know, I need this to be pretty. I will tell you a little story. My sister, who lives in England, lives in near Doncaster, and she goes to all the mind, body, spirits and what have you. But many years ago, before she opened up to this, and part of the reason she opened up to this, because her middle child actually died early in his 30s, and that sort of opened her up to life after death, and it's changed her life in a positive way, even though it was hugely traumatic. But she went to a clairvoyant many years ago, before I left England, and I lived in Norfolk then, and she said, Mary, I got some really wonderful things from this clairvoyant. And she said, you know what, Mary? She told me you're going to write 3 books. And I laughed. I just said, you're kidding me. I had, you know, nothing was further from my mind when I was living in Norfolk all those years ago that I would ever write any books. And what would I write books on? You know, I'd got absolutely no idea. So it is in the back of my mind. There might be another one, and who knows when that will be. But the thing that has been a blessing is that now the book is being translated into other languages, and it's already in Portuguese and Hungarian and in Japanese as well, and Chinese. So I mean, it's getting out there. And again, Carol, I am just grateful that the information is being useful. And the fact is that it's global, that people are waking up globally. And that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not just the odd person. And I get educators contacting me, clinical psychologists that are saying, Mary, we're seeing these kids. We want to know how, you know, how do we help them? How, you know, so there are many of those, which I call starseed professionals, that are seeing this. Midwives that saying, I'm birthing the starseeds. Nurses that saying, I'm recognizing them. You know, educators that saying, I'm seeing in my class, I know which ones are which. So it's brilliant. And all I'm really doing is for me, it's, and you know this, it's helping people to validate what's going on for them, because they feel so isolated. They feel like nobody understands. And I'm talking to them all the time. And they need just to know they're okay. And that this is okay to be this open to that part of themselves. And you know how important that is, how isolating it is.
Yeah, it's crucial, it's critical that we learn and experience and grow to know that upon our own journeys individually, that we are starseeds, and that we are here en masse, and that we're not alone, and that we're not different, even though, I mean, we're not different from other starseeds, even though we're different from the norm or the mainstream, or how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act, and that we, and then integrate that into through, you know, in ourselves, and ground it, and then come out and because most of us, I think, are teachers or healers or you know, Reiki masters and shamanic practitioners. There's so many subcategories to starseeds. There's Reiki master, there's even shamanic practitioner, healer, clairvoyant, psychic medium, healer, light worker, indigo, crystal, rainbow. They're all, to me, they're all subcategories of a starseed. So yeah, we're here en masse, and this is such a beautiful time on Earth, where there's so much possibility and potential for Earth that is just amazing. And I think it's a beautiful time to be here. And for myself, at times I've been, over the last couple of weeks, I've been in either a blissful state where nothing really matters, or I've been in, not fear, but I've been in anger. I've been quite angry about how things are unfolding. And I know that it's about balancing within myself and for all of us individually, so that we can find balance collectively. So that's something we need to work on individually, is the balance, is the polarities between different, between everything within us. So working through the imbalances to find balance within ourselves. So how are you finding it? How are you finding the times at the moment?
Well, like you, there's multiple levels. There's that one where I'm looking at the overview saying this is an important time now for people to actually start to wake up and actually see what's really going on this planet, not what the mainstream narrative is feeding us, but actually seeing beyond that to see, you know, what is at play here, which is extremely complex. But on the other level, the inconsistencies, the way that people are being controlled, this whole business of how easily people will believe the mainstream narrative and not look beyond it, and to say to them and question it and say, hold on a minute, that's not very logical, or whatever. And interestingly, I was talking to a 10-year-old living in Queensland about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he's someone who tells me he's visited by light beings and that he comes from a planet of light. And he described to me how on that planet of light, you instantly manifest. And he said, it's very hard on planet Earth. He said, because it's a bit of a game. He said, it takes longer to manifest, he goes. And I said to him, so what's your feeling about what's going on now on this planet? Oh, Mary, he said, this is the reset, was his words. This is the reset. And you can make of that what you like, but the reset to us waking up was how he was implying it. And I feel he's, you know, that was absolutely spot on, is what this is doing, even though this whole lockdown thing, I've got problems and issues with it on one level, another level, it's stopping people from being on the treadmill for a while and getting them to think what matters, what's important, what's actually really going on here. And it's getting people to think, because they're having time to, you know, at home. They're not chasing off to the gym or to the coffee shop or to wherever. They're at home with the kids and they're reconnecting with the family and all of that. Even though we see, you know, the hypocrisy that's going on. And I know particularly in England at the moment, the latest hypocrisy with those in government against one rule for them and another rule for everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, in a way that's been brilliant, because it is showing that. It's actually showing how that you know, this is really more of the truth of what's really going on. So it's being highlighted and corruption's being highlighted. So this is really the awakening. And I was told that 3 dates were important this year. One was in February when a lot of this exploded. The next one's in June, and another one in December. So I don't know what you've tuned into, Carol, but whether that makes any sense.
It does. It does. I was given dates of important months, and I was given September is going to be important. And I was and I don't know why, but something.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but just that it's going to be important. And I was also given that, and I don't know what country it is. I feel it's either America or the UK, probably more likely to be the UK, but it could be one or the other. I don't feel it's anywhere else. But that some law or legislation will be passed through or initiated in November, and then it will pass through in December, or the decision will be made in December. So some legal paperwork or some law passing through or being initiated or wanting to go through the legal system. And then we would get the outcome in December. So I don't know if that's positive or negative or good or bad. But yeah, those are the dates I was given, September and December, November, and then December would be the outcome. And also the other dates I was given was in 10 years time, there's going to be a mass change or a mass reset, or a mass initiation like there is now. And in 20 years' time, that will be the same. And in 30 years' time, it will be the same. So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now is really important. It's almost like, you know how we wake up and then we wake up again and then we wake up again individually. Well, it's almost like that I see unfolding. It's almost that awakening process that I see unfolding. But for the whole of humanity, I see it for the globe. So I do see a positive outcome. But I think that countries are, different countries to me feel like they have a different energy, a different vibe, a different frequency. And even especially if it's a large country like Africa or America, even different states have different energy, vibration, and frequency, but especially different countries. So all the countries have different kind of vibration, energy, frequency. And the English are very reserved people. So there's not as many protests here as other countries around the world, like America. I've actually stopped watching the mainstream media and the TV. So I don't know. I've just been watching a lot of YouTube and Facebook. So that's where I'm getting my information from. But I know that the British are very reserved. So there hasn't been as many protests here as other places. I do feel that South Africa or Africa is going to struggle hugely. And I have been shown that there's going to be mass weather changes in Africa. So I'm keeping an eye out for them. But I saw a post a few days ago where there's, I think it's a big storm, like a mega storm due in Africa to come out soon. I don't know if it's next couple of days or next weeks, but yeah, it's not looking good for Africa. So, yeah.
Well, I think the only way that I can look at this, rather than, we can get very angry with what we're seeing as the hypocrisy and the corruption, which we know is there, and the way people are being manipulated. But that when you take it to that other level and you look at the overview, all of us as souls have chosen to come here at this time. And we've come here to make a difference. We haven't come here to just watch the events. We've come to do something about it. And, when everyone starts to see the dark and saying, oh, it's not looking good and all the rest of it, I say, look, all these new children coming in and us older, star seeds, whatever, we've come in because we know we can do something. Otherwise we wouldn't bother. As a soul, I make a joke about that and say, knowing me and my personality, they would, if they said to me, Mary, you're going to incarnate on planet Earth, all this is going to happen and what have you, you're going to work really hard, but sorry, it's, the outcome isn't going to work out or something or other. Do you know what I would be saying as a soul? Find someone else to do it, because I ain't going back there for that. Yeah. Because I want to know that I've come in, and at least like others like yourself, we want to know that we can actually make a difference in some way. And I believe all these new souls coming in, so many new souls coming in, they've come in to make a difference. These children have told me they have a mission, they have a purpose, they have come to do something about it. A 9-year-old was telling me a few years ago that she was coming in as a teacher, not only for her parents, but humanity. Another young 10-year-old a few months ago told me it was his first Earth incarnation, and he had come from a planet, a blue planet, where he was actually a blue humanoid. And he said, this is my first incarnation on planet Earth. He said, and I'm a center seed, I'm connecting with the center of this planet, and I'm here to help with the pollution. Now they know their mandate, they know why they've come in, and these are the new aware humans, which I talk about in the new human. And often they're diagnosed as ADHD or Asperger's or dyslexic or whatever, but actually what they are is their new programs of humanity. They're wired differently, and that's why they behave differently, because they can't be programmed back into the old reality that isn't accurate and doesn't fit anymore. And it's important we recognize they are different because they're meant to be, because they're the new ones coming in. and many of them identify as hybrids. You know, when you were talking about the shape shifting or whatever, what's happening with that, I believe, is as we've got DNA from a numerous number of extraterrestrials, not just one, some say at least 12 different inserts.
Can I just jump in there, Mary? Because there's a lot of questions I've got for you. Over the last couple of weeks, the Pleiadians have told me that we either, and I find the whole science and DNA fascinating, that because when I read it in your book, because I always knew this, I always knew that our DNA had been manipulated and dumbed down. But when I read it in your book, that the scientists had found this to be true, for me that was fascinating. It was like a stamp on a it was like a stamp, you know, a registration mark. That, to me, that's just fascinating that science is now proving this stuff. It may not be mainstream science or the mainstream, the narrative science, but it's science nonetheless. So for me, that's fascinating. But what the Pleiadians told me the last couple of weeks, or over the last couple of months anyway, since the coronavirus hit the media, is that we've either got, or we're going to have 13 strands of DNA, not 12. Okay. So I don't know if that was in the past or if it's to come. Well, I know it's definitely to come, but I don't know if it was in the past, because they've shown me that we're going back to a similar time to Atlantis, which is kind of parallel to what's happening now, where where a meteor hit the Earth and the Earth was shifted off its axis, and our DNA was manipulated and changed and dumbed down, and now that's in reverse. So everything is shifting back. So the Earth is shifting back to its natural axis. We are going back to our natural blueprint, our natural DNA before it was changed and manipulated. So what's your thoughts on that? Because you were talking about DNA there.
Yeah, and some do talk about this extra strand, this golden strand of DNA, but I don't mention it so much as saying that what we're seeing now is an activation of the dormant DNA, because they've always said that we only use about 5% of our DNA. The rest they always call junk litter or junk DNA, because they didn't understand its purpose. Many metaphysicians, many healers, many of those working with frequency, with the star languages or light language and what have you, are saying what they're doing is activating the dormant DNA, which is our extraterrestrial component, our connection to the Pleiades, Andromedans, Taurans, and Sirius and whatever. And so what's happening with that, as that gets activated, more and more people are saying, I've got a sense I'm from the Pleiades, or I've got a sense I'm from Orion or Sirius or whatever it is, because that's being activated by the frequencies that are hitting the planet now, but also being brought in by the children, being brought in by experiencers that are doing healing with the star languages. They may be bringing the frequencies in through music. The creatives are bringing it in through music, through artwork. That's another way of activating the DNA, because of the perceptual shift that it creates. So there's many different ways that our DNA is being activated, and then we start to feel we're different. I was talking to, she's no longer 16, but when I talked to her first, she was 16, and said at 13, her name is Marina from Spain, and she said she was aware that what had happened was at 13, her DNA was activated sufficiently for her to realize she was a hybrid, and that she was a star seed, and that she got information downloads about who she was, her connection to different species and what have you. And she said that was my wake-up call. Other people will have a wake-up call when they see a UFO, you know, that will be, if you like, the first way of being the catalyst for, oh my goodness, so we're not alone, and the realization you're not alone, because you've seen something that you know isn't from here, you know it's not from here. So that's one way, but there are many other ways that people wake up. They may wake up through learning Reiki. They may wake up through a near-death experience and realize that they're having interactions with non-human intelligences. It may be through out-of-body experiences, or learning remote viewing, or having a shamanic experience, which they start to see the beings and what have you. So it isn't just one way. We can wake up to this reality and start to see spirits, start to see orbs, energy fields, and these beings. As soon as we get activated sufficiently to become more of our multidimensional selves, then we start to find that some people, if they're more religious, may say, well, I'm seeing angels. For someone else, they'll say, oh, I'm seeing light beings. It really is how you interpret your experiences, but there is no one way. We're all choosing as souls different ways to wake up, you know. And I've met many intuitives and psychics and clairvoyants that say, I didn't realize my life guide was actually an ET. They'd got to a point where, oh, it's that. And I remember many in the spiritual groups where they're developing their abilities. And I remember so many saying to me, Mary, the problem is, we're all learning to connect to our guides and our angels or whatever. But I can't mention that I've got a couple of ETs that visit me as well, because everybody else gets freaked out, because it's okay to see angels and fairies, but it's not okay to see a blue bald-headed guy with black eyes. So that's the limit many in the spiritual world struggle with, is this is more of the same, guys. It's not separate. Yeah, it's all in the same basket.
And I think there's a real, well, I don't think, I know it's true that there's a real divide even within spiritual fields. You've got the Reiki, you've got the shaman, you've got the healers, you've got the light workers, you've got the starseeds, you've got the spiritualist churches, which seem to be more divided than any of us. And you've got the UFO people over here. So that even within the spiritual field, they're divided. And we really need to come together now, on Earth, en masse. But even within that spiritual field, we really need to come together and work together. And one thing I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but one thing I wanted to ask you, Mary, why did you choose Australia?
Well, I call it my midlife crisis, is what happened. I had my oldest son was struggling with the stress of school and not sleeping at night because he was getting himself so worked up with the pressures of school. I was worried about him. And my husband was getting more and more fed up with what was happening with his work. He was working offshore. And I was lying in bed and it was probably about 4 a.m. Then all of a sudden this light bulb moment was, we need to go to Australia. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. Not having any sense at the time why I got this sudden thing. Yeah. And it was like, yeah. And I got up the next morning and I said to my kids, how would you like to go to Australia? And they're going, oh, all right. And my husband said to me, what on earth are you talking about? Going to Australia? Why are you suddenly doing that? And I said, well, give me some good reasons why we can't go. I was going like this. Yeah. And this is the interesting bit that I always say is the very next day, my husband got information about going where he was going to have to do things offshore again he didn't want to do. And he said, you were talking about Australia yesterday. He says, I'm fed up. You go and write to them because I think we ought to consider that. Literally within 24 hours. And I said, I've already done it because I've already sent out an inquiry. Now you ask me about the synchronicity of that. Literally within 24 hours. That's amazing. It was like something, and I don't know where that came from. I do now, but I didn't know then why suddenly this light bulb. And of course it was important that I needed to come. Because everything unfolded once I got to Australia. From my counselling, I was doing grief and bereavement to start with, which took me more and more into people's expanded experience. I also was invited to join a group by a wonderful medium. She's actually English, who and a clinical psychologist said, Mary, there's this lady who's been told by her guides to teach professionals like ourselves to work multidimensionally. And she said, are you interested? And I said, absolutely, because anything weird and wonderful I'm there, I said, but I'm probably too normal for me to ever have any any ability, but I'm going to come and watch and be fascinated, was my first thought. I didn't realize that it would be 3 years of training where we did everything from remote healing, the whole thing, you know, from dowsing to connecting to channeling to overshadowing, the whole gamut in those 3 years. And I found that
sorry, Mary, was that in the UK or in Australia?
It was actually in Australia. I was working, believe it or not, I was working in a Catholic counseling agency at the time. And one of the clinical psychologists, who was another Catholic, actually said that she'd heard about this lady. And literally, from that, there were two clinical psychologists. There was myself, there was a nursing sister, there was a trance medium, and our teacher. And she always said, look, this class is from my guides. You know, she just brought the guides in, the guides would orchestrate. And I remember going, Carol, thinking literally everyone else was going to be amazing, and I'd probably just sit and watch, because I was far too normal. I was far too normal for this to happen for me, because I thought then, I really believed that, you know, it was only certain people had a gift. And of course, I've now realized that everyone has the gift. They just don't realize it. And that was huge for me, because certain things happened during that time, which proved to me absolutely that this was real, because there were so many, and I came in open, but quite skeptical, because I was, you know, I was a very grounded ex-nurse. So it was like, now you're going to have to prove to me this is accurate. And it was, and it was, and it was, and it was, and it was. And it was like, hold on a minute. Are you going to take, it took me 3 years to get to a point where I couldn't doubt it anymore. And it's, Carol, it's been invaluable, because so many people that have in contact with these intelligences are expanding their multidimensional awareness, and they're opening up clairvoyantly, clairaudiently, clairsentiently, and they don't know what to do with it, because many of them might be coming from a religious background. They might be a physicist, or, you know, a scientist. They may be a medical doctor, and they're saying, I'm scared I'm going to go crazy if I open up to this. And yet this is what's happening. They're having downloads, they're connecting to intelligences. So a lot of my job, believe it or not, is helping them to understand how to ride the bike. I say, well, you're already riding the bike. I'll show you where the gears are, where the horn is, where the bell is, you know, where the lights are. So I give them a map to help them understand what's going on in a way that feels grounded and safe to them, because often it's the lack of confidence. Think, am I going crazy? Maybe if I do this, I'm going to go crazy. All those things you know about. And so I'm saying, oh, you won't. And self-doubt. Yeah. So my job is, often as not, is let me show you how it works. Let me show you literally how it works. So you've then got a map that helps you work with it and integrate it. So you are then working, you're totally functional then. You're not just doing all the left brain with your right brain completely closed. You're now working in harmony with the left and right brain, your 3D and your multidimensional, because that's who we are. We are meant to be working with both, you know, and I say you need to be more grounded, not less.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah. That's, for me, that's been a life lesson where I've needed to learn to be here, to be grounded, to be in my body, and to integrate all the higher dimensions and the Pleiadians in through my body and into the earth, because of my childhood. I left my body, you know, I didn't want to be here, I was gone. So I know how to access those realms and those dimensions. What I find difficult is to be here.
Yeah.
But when the coronavirus kicked into play, the pandemic, when it kicked into play, I was woken up to another level again, another unfolding, another veil being lifted for me, where I began to realize, you know, things were And things have been happening so fast, so quickly. There's no time to process anything. And I actually feel sorry for people who've got to wake up now, because I've had 46, 47 years to wake up and process this stuff, to the point where I'm publicly, even publicly channeling the Pleiadians now, which has just happened over the last couple of weeks. When I say publicly, I mean, because I've been channeling them for a long time, since 2009. But now I was doing an interview a couple of weeks ago, and they weren't next to me, they were in me. So I closed my eyes, and they integrated with me and spoke through my voice. So I'm now learning how to do that, and that's very new to me. So we're waking up individually in stages. And I realized a couple of weeks ago when this kicked off that, oh my God, what a beautiful time to be here, and to be working in this field to help other people. And isn't it, it's an amazing time to be here. It's such a beautiful awakening. And this has never happened on Earth before. Never. And it will never happen again. It's come close to it at Atlantis. But Atlantis was overtaken by negative ET energy. This is what I've been told. This is what I believe. And so Atlantis was overtaken by negative ET energy, and they didn't see it coming. The Atlanteans didn't see it coming. But we do. We do see it coming. So we've got a choice. So it's parallel to what happened at the time of Atlantis. But the difference being that we do see it coming. It's a mass awakening. And it's just amazing time to be here. And also that a lot of the spiritual teachers or the spiritual fields, whatever field they're in, have been, even conspiracy theorists have been knocked aside and ignored as crazy or out there or away with the fairies or talking to aliens, you know, and all that negative connotation stuff. And I think over the next, well, I think it's already started, but I think over in the future, but it's already started, but I think in the future there's going to be an influx of people who are going to search us out, Mary, are going to search out all the spiritual stuff, all of it. You know, they're going to whiz through the books, they're going to whiz through the videos, they're going to whiz through and absorb the knowledge and kind of download it into their bodies like it's tangible in codes and symbols and information, light language, and process it into their bodies. But I do feel sorry for the people that need to wake up now, because they've got 5 minutes to do it, and they need to do it now, you know.
I think you're absolutely right, Carol. I think we've all been set up to be there with what the awareness that we have, so that when people do get that wake-up call and are activated, they've got resources that can help them integrate this new awareness, because that's what I've already started doing much of the time, is helping people to manage this as they start to be activated and become more aware. It's, what do I do with this? You know, it's very scary when your reality completely changes and you start to become, you know, connecting to different energies, seeing spirits, seeing orbs, seeing energy fields and whatever. To have someone like yourself that can ground that with them, to help them ground it and to normalize it, so that they can actually then start. And I will say to them, now it's time for you to communicate. You know, this isn't just about waiting for it to happen to come in. Now you become proactive. You start saying, now explain this to me. Now, you know, whatever, so that you're giving them a manual, you know, to work from. That was why I wrote Awakening, for the same reason. It was showing them a process. How do I know this is real? What happens when I feel this? And you talked about overshadowing, where now you're being overshadowed by these intent. I mean, I've experienced that. I know the first time it freaked the living daylights out of me when it happened. I'm going to tell you right. What was that?
Well, I was live on a
oh my goodness. At least mine was over, you know, having a cup of tea with friends, you know, and that was scary enough. I always remember my teacher saying, "Have you done this before?" And I went, "No," because it freaked me out. I didn't know what and she, "Oh, that's just overshadowing." You know, she was very, very normal about it and what have you. But to do that publicly and for that to happen, I mean, is a big one for you. I mean, you know, I wow.
Yeah, it's big. And when I came out of it, I really felt my body. I could really feel my body.
Yeah.
And because I get so ungrounded at times, because I'm as a child, I was more out of my body than I was here.
Yeah.
And so I know how that feels. And I'm still at times, I'm not so used to being in my body. And but I think when this kicked off and I realized why we're here, I was happy to be in my body.
Yeah.
So I was wanting to get grounded, and it's a balance though for me. I kind of go out and then I come back, go out and come back, go out and come back. So, and now I really need to get grounded to bring this forward more. But I think even within our work that we're doing, Mary, I think there's different modalities that we've come here to learn and understand and develop and then bring forth. Like mine would be coming from a place of healing abuse and trauma, and how to, because as soon as you get abuse and trauma, you're gone. Most of us are gone. So for me, I think it's learning how to heal abuse and trauma and ground the higher energies through your body and to teach that. And I think with you, it's, I could be wrong, but I think with you, what your forte is, because we're in the same fields, we're in the same bringing awareness to multidimensional. But I think with you, what I've seen is that your forte is to you seem to have the ability to get to allow people to really open up. And the personal stories in the book are like, people haven't held back. They've really they haven't held this back or that back and shared a little bit. They've really opened up, beautifully opened up. But I think from what I've seen, your forte is to be able to reach children. Is to reach children who are just beautiful and out of this world and beyond what we know, beyond what the normal knows. I mean, these children are divine beings, multidimensional divine beings, and they've got so much knowledge and wisdom and grace and understanding, and there's very few people, Mary, that I know that give those kids a voice. Very few people I know. What would you, for mums and parents and family members that are hearing children say they've got all this, they're having experiences, what would you say to them if anyone's listening? How can they reach you?
Well,
is there, like, if they want to work with you, how would they reach you?
Well, you know, all they need to do is Google me, and I've got a website, obviously, as well as Facebook. They're the main ones that they can access me as well. And I put all the information also in The New Human and in Awakening, how to contact me. My email's there. It's not hard. Getting back to the children, I've always had a great affinity to children anyway. When I was nursing, I actually worked in special care unit with all the prem babies, and I loved that. I loved looking after these little tiny souls that were about this big. So that shows you where I've always been drawn, really, is to these new beautiful souls coming in, and I'm feeling very protective towards them. But the clue of the way that children are is, I remember I was talking to someone in the US, and his son came in. He was 9 at the time, and he said, "I want to speak to Mary," out of the blue, 1 minute, you know, like this. And I said, "So why do you feel you want to speak to me?" Well, he said, "It's because of your frequency." So there you have it. It wasn't because I looked a nice middle-aged lady. It was because of my frequency. But when I was speaking to a 7-year-old, when I was in the US, and I spent 3 days with parents and children from 8 to 16, and it was to get them to start sharing. And this little 7-year-old wanted to speak to me on his own. And he started out by saying that Bigfoot visited him, and there was a teenage one and his sister, and Granddad Bigfoot was all white and visited him regularly. And then he says, you know, I can speak dolphin. So he said, do you want to hear it? So I said, oh, that'd be cool, you know. So he does all the clicks of the dolphin and what have you. And then he said to me, you know, I can tell when someone's telling the truth and when they're lying. And I said, so what does that feel like for you? And he said, well, when they lie, I go all cold. And when they speak the truth, I feel warm. So that was the way he explained. And for me, what I say to parents is this: listen to what they're telling you, because the more you listen and honor that, the more they'll tell you. If you shut them down, then, or tell them it's not real, or all this kind of stuff, all you're doing then is meaning that they'll feel unsafe. They won't feel they can trust then to be open with you. And you always, and people say to me, well, how do you know that the child isn't just fantasizing or it's an imagination? I said, because there's an integrity to it. The parents know when the kids are making something up. I would know whether one of my children was making up a story or coming from an experience or a knowing or a sensing. And I said, and the important thing to know is most of these parents are not front loading their kids. They're not wanting that. They are surprised and amazed and stunned often by what these children are telling them, their children are telling them. That is, you know, I've talked to many parents who say, my kid's saying, you're not my real parents. My real parents come from space, you know, and they say, what are you talking about, you know? And this is a very common one, where they will say they've had other parents. And some of the children even talk about pre-birth, where one little boy said, he was 10, he said, I was a will-o'-the-wisp spirit, and then I looked at what life I wanted on this planet, and then I found myself in mummy's tummy. Was his presence of being aware of being spirit and choosing to come in.
Amazing.
You know, the awareness of them, that's the kind of awareness we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's really evolution. It's evolution to me, you know, where we're just evolving and waking up. And yeah, it's just amazing time and beautiful time. And I've always, because I didn't have any schooling, so because the Pleiadians stopped me from going, so I know that the school system is not good. I know that it's set up, in my understanding, it's set up by the negative agenda or the cabal or negative ET energy, whatever you want to call it, which are running all systems on Earth. The schools, the banks, the governments, every system on Earth, they're at the top of it. So you do have some good people in it, in the systems, but at the heart of it, at the top of it, to me, it's run by negative ET energy. So I've never believed that the school system is a good thing. As an adult, I've never believed it's a good thing. So I believe that we need to shift our focus off the negative and onto positive new systems that we need to create. So I don't think it's a good thing that we send our kids back to school, because the school system does not have our best interests at heart. The governments do not have our best interests at heart. The banks, they do not have the pharmaceutical companies, none of it has our best interests at heart. So what's your thoughts on that with the school system? Because I think we should just create new school systems like Rudolf Steiner, or even more, even a step ahead, or even more evolved than Rudolf Steiner, and homeschool, you know?
I think you're absolutely right, because I've talked to educators that have seen the problems with mainstream curriculum and what have you. And I do believe there's an agenda behind that. And these are educators that are seeing for themselves, they're starseeds themselves, knowing it didn't work for them, and seeing how unhappy the children and why a lot of children don't want to go to school and hate it. I remember a 15-year-old writing to me and saying, Mary, school is a prison for me. They have no real knowledge. You're just programmed into certain set. A 9-year-old saying the same, they just program you out of your light, was what she said. And the teachers press the keys. And so for me, Steiner is a good interim. Some of my grandchildren go to a Steiner school, but ultimately, if we get the shift that needs to happen, I believe a system, if you can't homeschool, would be, and I've often talked about wanting a kind of awakening center, and for the children to basically create the environment so the children can come with their awareness and tell us what they need to be all that they need to be. In other words, trusting their awareness, trusting the fact that they understand, because what a lot of individuals may not realize is they're being educated on board craft. One 8-year-old explained to me very clearly that she'd been taken up on the spacecraft and to a planet where she's being taught to levitate, how to use a third eye. Many of the teenagers have been taught quantum physics, origin of the species, cosmology, a whole range of things. And I remember an 8-year-old telling me, who came to my office actually, and he said, when we go up on the craft, 2 of my school friends come with me, and we're in a group. And he said, some of them aren't, because I said, are they all the same as you? And he said, no, some aren't human. They look human, but they've got bigger eyes. He said, and we're taught to use our mind. And it's very, and the information is very complex, he goes. So I said to him, so can you tell me about the complex information? And he said, no, because it's too complex for you. So that put me in my place well and truly. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, to provide the environment for them with their knowing, with their awareness, and for us to facilitate what it is they've come here to do, I think is really it'll be the reverse of everything we ever thought of as the parents, to show them how to be human, how to manage this planet, but for them to show us what their skills are as they've come to this planet. Many communicating with animals, many are communicating with plants, etc., etc. I meet so many starseeds that are, indicating their ability to do all of this. They're teaching us, and we need to listen, and then we can provide the environment they need to nurture that awareness so that they can do what they've come here to do. Yeah.
And I think that parents need to stop seeing it as imagination.
Yeah.
Because it's not imagination. When you're playing with imaginary friends.
Yeah.
To me that's just spirit. What I just wanted to ask you, Mary, what was the name of the going off the subject a bit? What was the name of the scientist in your book that was talking about DNA and how it's he put the dots together where he could see that it was designed?
Yeah. Well, there's a number that I've quoted in my book, because I think I deliberately put those with what I call mainstream credentials in there, because people need to see that this isn't imagination. This isn't just a theory. The first one that has the most credibility is Dr. Francis Crick, co-founder of the DNA molecule. Him with another doctor actually got a Nobel Prize for that. But he always said in his book, Life Itself, that humans were intelligently designed, that they were responsible, because other molecular biologists that have also mentioned it have said they've seen where we've been spliced, where the DNA has been spliced and added to. And there's another book called The Intervention Theory by Lloyd Pye, where a whistleblower scientist actually said that he says he sees it, and other of his colleagues know it's true, but he said, if I talk about this publicly, I'll be strung up. Basically, I'll be hung from the tree to dry, you know. So
can I just jump in there, Mary? Sorry, love.
Yeah.
Dr. Francis Crick.
Yes, C-R-I-C-K.
Okay.
And the references are in the book.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to jump in there was no, it's gone. Carry on, Mary. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I mean, I've also, you know, there are others that have come out with even more expanded, and one of them is a gentleman, Dr. Brown, who is a molecular biologist, who wrote to me about the fact that we are changing as a species, and he mentions ADHD, Asperger's, and autism, and what have you, some forms of autism and what have you, saying this is a new upgrade of human. He actually states that. Yeah. And he wrote to me, oh gosh, this was about 2010, where he just laid it all out and said, you know, they already have innate knowledge in them, that, you know, that this is the new kind of human. And it was interesting that he qualified everything that another young lady who I met in the 90s, who was doing all
there, Mary? Sorry, love. What was his name? Dr. Bowen?
Dr. William Brown.
William Brown. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go on, love. Sorry.
Yeah. It was in the late 90s when I met Tracy Taylor, who was what I was running an experiencer group with.
The artist.
Yeah, she's an artist, an experiencer, and she got this download that was telling her that we'd been intelligently designed, that this was completely opposite to everything she'd ever believed. And it just came to her that we were intelligently designed by these intelligences, and she didn't know what to do with it. And
I saw some of her artwork.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah,
that's right. And it's multidimensional. But the bottom line was that everything she told me, Dr. William Brown 10 years later basically said exactly the same as her, that they're an upgrade human, that their brains work faster, that even their physical senses are expanded. In other words, they see more of the visual spectrum. Their hearing is more sensitive. Sense of touch is more, you know, that is more sensitive. So that, you know, the whole physical body is an upgrade, not just their consciousness, their awareness. So it's both. And Dr. Lena Olson, who's a molecular biologist too, is also an experiencer. And as an experiencer, she said, I'm one of them. And she called them letter people, like ADHD.
I read her book, yeah.
You know, and she's another one who said, you know, this is the new upgrade human, and we are being upgraded. So it's not just one here and there. There are more and more coming to understand we are changing, you know, and that I think is, you know, if you want the tangibility, I'm all into getting it as tangible as possible. And that was why I've always brought in the science, because then you've got it from both angles.
That's so important to bring in the science, because this is not, you know, I got to the point, I think it was 2009, where I realized that it had nothing to do with psychic or woo-woo. It comes down to chemicals in the brain, and often through trauma, an excess of DMT is released in the brain that causes psychic awareness and psychic visions and mediumship. It opens a door. So it's not woo-woo stuff. It's not psychic stuff that's all woo-woo and out there. It's science. It's science. And one of the main reasons I don't like the school system so much is because they're teaching false, excuse my language, crap and nonsense and BS that they're told to teach. And there's another thing I wanted to bring up there as well, but I'll get to that in a second. And so the school system are teaching false information and lies and nonsense. Many of them don't realize they are teaching that. Many of them believe that to be the truth, but there is definitely people within that who are teaching it, who know it to be nonsense, and they're just doing it because they get a paycheck. And for years I struggled with not understanding that. And then the Pleiadians, when I was started to consciously channel them in 2009, they said to me, Carol, look, when someone is a scientist or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, and they're quite high up in their field, and they've spent their whole life's work on this subject, and this is what they believe, and this is what they're told, and this is what they're taught, and this is their whole world, this is their whole perception and perspective, and they're not able to see outside of the box. So the Pleiadians told me not to be so hard on myself, that they couldn't see outside of the box, because if they did, it would really drag the rug from under their feet, and everything would cause them to have some kind of a breakdown to some extent, because everything would be whipped away, a bit like what's happening on Earth at the moment. The veil would suddenly be lifted, and they'd have 5 minutes to wake up, and they'd have to do it now. So the Pleiadians said to me, don't be so hard on yourself, Carol, because that's their whole life's work. It's their whole belief system. And if you suddenly come along and show them that it's false, that's going to affect them, and they won't be able to handle it. So yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. When they've been programmed into a belief system and a scientific paradigm, certainly many of those that have tapped into the other realms, and the teachers in the other realms, are being shown the inaccuracy of how we understand reality. And it's being, they call it cognitive dissonance, don't they? When you can't cope with a whole new reality, and yet everyone who's had an experience like yourself and others know full well that you have to let go of what the mainstream is telling you to find the truth. And we have this in every field where we've been lied to. Anthropology, archaeology, look at what all the different theories around the pyramids and whatever,
Don't get me started on that, Mary.
That's just one example of the rubbish. I will not watch documentaries on some of these things because they irritate the life out of me.
Me too.
You're not that's crap. That's not true, because you look at the other information that we're discovering, and that's not been incorporated into mainstream understanding,
I know.
And they're already, there are those challenging everything on the planet, and so we should, because we're not being given the truth. Let's face it, the biggest thing of all, that we're visited by non-human intelligences and have been for millennia. The biggest truth, that is the most important thing everyone on this planet should know and understand, our connection to these intelligences, and nobody's getting told the truth. The biggest lie ever, and yet it's our right to know the truth of our origins, who we are and what we are, etc., etc. And we're being lied to over that, and then everything else feeds from that. Every other thing that we've been taught, that is being put out in mainstream, that's one way of manipulating you by not telling you the truth. And I think the biggest thing for me as a researcher, once I started to look into this and how many lies that are put out there about our origins, who we are, what we are, just like the whistleblower that said, if I came out with the truth of the fact that we are a designed species, I'll be hung up to dry for speaking the truth by others within the field, because there's this whole club thing that if you want to stay in the club, you have to continue that lie. Even when you know it's a lie, you're still having to do it, because otherwise you no longer got a profession. You've no longer got, an income,
paycheck,
whatever.
Or stability and a paycheck and a house and a mortgage, and you families, and you've got family and kids, and you've got responsibility. So I get how difficult it is, but for those people I would recommend that they write books with what do you call it?
Or a pseudonym.
Yes, thanks, Mary. Name, so that they're not having their real name, but write the book, you know, to expose the truth, because we have been lied to on a mass scale about everything. And one of the things the Pleiadians told me over the last couple of months is that there's going to be mass UFO sightings en masse around the world that are not going to be shown en masse on the media, on the mainstream media. And there's also the possibility. And so when they told me that a couple of months ago, and I think it was at February, when we started to go into lockdown, or whenever it was, when the coronavirus really kicked off, that there's going to be mass UFO sightings around the earth that's not going to be on the mainstream. And now you're seeing that on Facebook and YouTube and places. And they also said that there's the highly possible, highly likely that there's going to be a genuine landing, not a fake one, genuine landing. And then, so yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of waiting for that to unfold. Having said that, did you see the I think it was Brazil or Mexico recently, where there was a video on YouTube where a woman was, did you see it, Mary, where she was recording? I just want to share that for the people watching. There was a video recorded on YouTube. It's probably deleted by now. They've probably got rid of it. But she was talking in her language. I can't remember if it was Brazil or Mexico or where it was, but so it wasn't in English, but she was basically saying, oh my God, they're shooting the ET, and then you heard gunshots. It was quite scary and then you heard other things like don't let anyone know, and don't let anyone record it, and other things as well. So have you, what do you think of that? Have you seen it? Or
only briefly. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I do know that they've been shooting at these craft for many years. We know that they do that, and they'll do that, and they have done. There's been a number of crashes due to the new technologies they have, which they'll target craft and what have you. And we do know, I mean, from Rodwell, the very famous one, actually there were two crashes there.
Can I just jump in there before you say it? And because what I was told is that by the Pleiadians is that they shot down the one at Rodwell. That's what I was told. Anyway, sorry, Mary, go on.
Yeah, well, there were actually two. Ultimately, there was another one further away. But the bottom line is that they've got the technology now to target them, and they will do if they can. And this is taking it to another level.
That's horrendous. That's horrendous.
Well,
they would do that.
Here's another level to this. People don't know, is those that are having experiences. And I spoke to a gentleman in England when I was there a few years ago, and he said, Mary, the military know that they come for me, and I can call them. And he said, they watch me, and when they come through the portal, because they're watching me, their helicopters and what have you are monitoring, and they will actually then target the craft as it's coming in, because it's connected to me and my experiences with them. So that they know, you know, this is why people who are having experiences start to see the black helicopters. And
I've had that, Mary. He's not alone in that. There's, you know, I've been targeted for a number of years, even probably as a child, and just starting to remember a lot of stuff. But I woke up a couple of months ago. Not a couple of months ago. It was about 2 years ago now. I went to do a talk at the UFO Academy with Katrine O'Neill. You've been there, so and I think it was on the morning that I was due to go, and I was going from Portsmouth to London, and I was woken up by the sound of a helicopter outside my window. I'm on the second floor, so I'm not very high up, and I woke up and I could see the helicopter in my mind's eye, and it was so loud I heard it, but it was a black and red helicopter, and it was outside the window, and I'm surprised that no one saw it, and I'm surprised that my partner John didn't see it. But yeah, I mean, they do know. They're well, and that's why they target us, because they know that we are connected to other beings that don't come from here, wherever they're from. Mine is Pleiadians, but I think it's all what I've been shown, Mary, is that and this was during a shamanic journey in Ireland, is that I come from the Pleiades, and so my connection goes back to past life, and that then the negative agenda or negative ET energy, so we're tracked in a positive way by the positive and by the negative. We're traced and tracked on an energetic level, probably, if it's not what do you call them, if it's not implants, but we're definitely tracked on an energetic level, on a soul level, because they know who we are before we get here, before we're born. Like the Pleiadians knew who I was before I knew myself, of who I was going to be born to, where I was going to be born. So I've always had a connection to the Pleiadians, but the negative agenda were also aware of that, and their agenda is, in my understanding, their negative agenda is to stop us from waking up and being in our power and exposing the truth. And it's also very much to do with what's happening on Earth now, which is a mass awakening. So they have somehow tracked us energetically before we're born, before we get here, in a positive and a negative, through the positive and the negative, so that because there's two agendas going on simultaneously, where we're tracked by both. So both are aware of us individually. So, and they both have opposing agendas. So that's why so many people are targeted, by not just by negative ET energy, but also black ops in the military, which is very earth-based. It's physical people, physical technology, and I had I was going to sleep a couple of months ago, and I heard this electronic voice, first time I've ever heard it, and it did freak me out a bit, to be honest, because I never heard an electronic voice before. But anyway, over to you.
Look, Carol, I think it's important to mention very much that there are opposing forces here. And one of them is what we call MILAB, the military abductions and what have you. And I think people need to know that the reason the ones that there's been put out in the media are often the ones that are the most terrified people who've had experiences and what have you. And they've always attributed it to all the ETs and whatever, when in fact some of it is military. It's military abductions. They have the technology. They can emulate an experience with ETs and emulate it and make people believe that it's ETs. And that's part of it. But also the reason they're picking them up is they want to know. They interrogate them. They want to know what happens on the craft. They want to know what they're being taught. They want to understand what the agendas are of the ETs and what have you. And they traumatize them sufficiently so that they will never talk about it. Or if they do talk about it, they're going to sound crazy. So the whole thing is to debunk the fact that this is real. And that's one of the ways they do it. So, of course, there's the ridicule. Oh, yeah. And if they realize it's military, then that makes it even more crazy, doesn't it? That humans are actually doing this to humans. I have found when I've worked with experiencer groups, not just here, but overseas, that the ones that are the most traumatized have actually been the ones that have had MILAB, have had the military, not from ETs, but from the military, from our own species, by the way, guys, that are doing this, our own species. Man's inhumanity to man. So whatever you want to blame them for, actually, we're doing a pretty good job of emulating anything that is dark or whatever down here. And I think we know that is part of the dark agenda of this planet anyway, that there's all this that needs to be uncovered. And for anyone who talks about, that's a great conspiracy theory, let me say to you this: conspiracy theory was coined by the CIA to debunk people that see the conspiracy And when somebody says that to me, I say, no, I'm not, it's not a theory, and I'm a critical thinker. And I'm able to see that not everything you're being shown and taught on mainstream actually is accurate. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's not. It's the propaganda that they want you to believe. So it's not about a theory. This is about research that has shown this to be absolutely accurate.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Mary. And the conspiracy theory words have got such a negative connotation. And like you said, they were made up by the CIA. I think it was the CIA or FBI, or one of them.
It was the CIA coined it.
CIA. Yeah, I found that out recently. But I call it truth serum now, because, for years and years and years, they denied the hell out of chemtrails. And now they are admitting it. So that's just one example where we've been lied to en masse and ridiculed, extremely taken the piss out of for believing in chemtrails, when it's very obvious that I can see it. It's there. It's outside my ears. It's in the sky above me. And to be laughed at and ridiculed and just taken the piss out of, excuse my language, and now they are admitting it. And no one is saying, oh, well, but they're just ignoring it now, even though they've come out and admitted it. So the same can be said of all the other stuff, all the other conspiracy theories, because they're not conspiracy theories. There is truth in them. There is truth in them. In the vast majority of them, there are exceptions, of course, like flat Earth, which I don't believe in at all. But the vast majority of them are real. We're not alone in the universe. We've never been alone, and we don't come from here. We've been on an hour and 28 minutes. Let's wrap things up a bit, Mary. What else would you like to say?
Well, how many days have you got? Let's leave it like this. If anyone has any questions or want to understand whether this is relevant to them, I've got a questionnaire that's on the website, but also I can send to people that can help them connect the dots. You don't have to send it back to me if you don't want to. But if people are suspecting this is relevant to them, the questionnaire will help them put that together, or at least see whether or not it's relevant. Because I think a lot of people are wondering whether this is real. Not everyone who's had contact has that scary kind of scenario where they're woken up and taken through windows and whatever. It may be that you've always felt different, never felt like you belonged, always been aware of a greater reality, felt like you've got a sense of mission and purpose and what have you. And your experience may be completely loving and benevolent and kind and supportive. So not all of them have the scary stuff. Some will, because that's their soul mandate to wake up, is the challenges of that experience. But what we're seeing is a majority do not have that. And one of the surveys said that 85% of those 4,000 individuals had psycho-spiritual transformation. So it doesn't sound like there's anything really negative there. If you're having that as a shift in your consciousness after your interactions, that is telling you more about benevolent, loving, spiritual beings that are supporting you on your soul journey.
And that's the proof in the pudding, Mary, because when you have experiences like that, positive experiences, it changes everything for you. And it is a process. It's a process. You don't suddenly wake up one day and publicly announce that you're channeling the Pleiadians on a stage. There's a whole process behind it. And I used to be, I didn't realize for a long time that there was a negative side to it. So I was kind of, I suppose you'd say airy fairy with it, or candy floss, and then when I began to channel the Pleiadians, and after a while I began to realize, oh, hold on, it's not just all positive. There's a negative side to it as well, which is a natural law in the universe, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have something exist without the opposite existing. So there is two sides to it, two sides to the coin. So yeah. So would you talk a bit about CERN and the freedom movement or project? And I know that you just touched on it briefly there. Is that still going now, or what's happening with those?
Oh, right. Well, CERN is my organization that I created in '97. So I'm the founder and the principal of CERN, which is the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, which I created because I wanted a professional resource to offer people, because my background is in counseling, hypnosis, etc., etc. So I wanted to provide that for an information for those that are having experiences. So that's my, but it's gone global in the sense that I get emails from all over the world, whether it's Uruguay and Africa or Europe. The second organization, as I'm a co-founder of, is the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Experiencer Research, free, which was created on probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. And we've all the research that's done with that is not only Dr. Edgar Mitchell was one of the co-founders, but Ray Hernandez, a lawyer, and Dr. Rudy Shield, who's an astrophysicist. And what we did with those within it, with all the academic protocols, we created a survey of 4,200 people. And from that 600 questions, then we put in the book Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness of Contact. But that's now changed because we're getting more scientists on board. Yeah. And so it's being called...
Time for another book, Mary.
Well, this is where I'm doing a chapter for Contact and, Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. It's evolved into that. So we're bringing the science now, those that are the physicists, the astrophysicists.
That's just amazing, because that's where we need to go.
The next volume. That will be the next volume. So we've got volume 1, which is, hold on.
Okay. And let's have a look at that.
That is it. And look at the thickness of it.
Well done, Mary.
That's the survey. We've all got chapters in it. I've got one chapter in it to do with the new human and what have you. But the surveys are in there, and it's a huge volume of our research, and it's got the science. But we're going to take it from there into volume 2, which will then take it to the science of the soul, basically consciousness. What is consciousness? So we're taking it to that next level of consciousness. So, and it's going to have, the PhDs, all those that have credible, what we call the credentials, but are exploring this in a multidimensional way. So that's where we're going.
Are you going to have Greg Braden in it? I love his work.
I'm not sure whether he's one of the many scientists. I can send you a bit of info on all the scientists that are in it. I'm just trying to see if,
that would be great.
Because I do know, I'm just trying to see if you hold on just one little second to see if I can find it briefly.
Yeah, I'll just keep talking while you're looking. Yeah, that would be great, because I love the science behind it,
Yeah.
For years I hated science because it was totally against my own beliefs, but then I began to realize, oh, hold on, there's quantum physics and there is science that does support and does prove what I believe.
So this is an intro to it, Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, and we're taking in contact modalities, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, ghost spirits, channelings, UFO contact, remote viewing, ESP, hallucinogenics, journeys, all the PDPs.
So can you just say the name of it again?
Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. And I'll give you some idea of the researchers. Dr. Rudy Shield, who's astrophysics, Dr. Jeffrey Long, a medical oncologist, Dr. Gary Schwartz, PhD from Harvard, Dr. John Climo, Professor of Psychology and Consciousness, Dr. Bob Davis, who's a neuroscientist, Dr. Claude Swanson, who's a physicist, Dr. Michael Grosso, Stephen Swartz, Dr. John Alexander, who's done all the near-death stuff, There's Dr. Russell Scarpone. So this is the list of scientists that are all in there. And we've got consultants like Dr. Dean Radin, Mishlov, Joseph Burke, Greer, whole list of scientists involved. So we're taking this into mainstream and saying, now debunk it.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, because you're going to have a problem.
Well done, Mary. Well done for bringing that into the world, for birthing that, for, you know, bringing the science, you know, because there's very few people that are, you know, like I was saying earlier, and you can understand why, when that's their whole life's work, you know, why the majority are not doing it, or the mainstream are not doing it. You know, and even with the giants that have been found around in different places around the earth. And I remember as a kid, they told me, the Pleiadians told me that dinosaurs walked with man. And I said to them as a child, you know, that is crazy. Because I didn't believe them. And then years later, when I started to consciously channel them, they told me again, dinosaurs walked with man. And we showed you that as a child. And I went away and I did research that a little bit, because mostly I don't research the stuff. But I did research that, and I found that actually it had been found already. So thank God, you know, so that gave me validation that what I'd been within myself, that what I'd been told as a child, all of it, you know, even the stuff that was way out there, like dinosaurs walking with man, and the very opposite was being taught in schools, you know. So it validated, it gave me the foundation that I could within myself, that what I had, everything I'd experienced was real, and maybe a bit out there and not in the mainstream, but it was real. It wasn't just, you know, imagination.
Can I add, Carol? Can I add to that, just so that this will amuse you now, you've just said that, because I was talking to, I can't remember whether he was 7 or 9, told me that he was one of the humans at the time of the dinosaurs.
Wow.
And he'd also experienced an incarnation as a hare, not a rabbit, but a hare. So he'd experienced being an animal, but he says, I walked with the dinosaurs in one of his lifetimes. And he was either 7 years old or 9 years old, I can't remember, but he remembered that incarnation. Just so you know, you're not the only one that's being told that. I thought you might find that interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should maybe try and get him to maybe do it as a short story, or as an interview, or somehow to get it out there in the world, either online or in a book or in a story, or not a story but a short book, or somehow, you know. Because,
I mean, it's important. I try and tell as much of the information that comes through from these children, and the parents contact me and say, my child's saying X, Y, and Z. So there's so much. I mean, I've put a lot in the New Human deliberately, but there's so much more that's coming out all the time as I connect with parents and whatever. So it's been fascinating, but validation for you about what you're being told. He was either 7 or 9 years old. I can't remember with that young lad, but he also remembers being incarnated as a hare, literally as an animal as well. So it's coming out.
Yeah. There's a Buddhist belief that we've been everything. That there's nothing we haven't been. You know, we've been the murderer, we've been the perpetrator, we've been the victim, we've been everything. We've met all those people before. So everyone we meet in our life, we've known before, we've met before, but also that we have been everything before. So we've been all life forms before, you know, from plants to trees to animals to fish to everything. Yeah, the evolution. So have you got any movies coming up? Have you got any documentaries coming up?
No, I am going to be in one that was filmed while I was at the expo in Los Angeles. I'm not sure of the name of it yet, but I've been interviewed for that. And I may end up doing some more. There's been interest in some more to do with consciousness and what have you. And the free organization that's evolving has also done several that are going to be documentaries where I've done, because I'm being one of the co-founders, we all met up in Laughlin in Nevada and really explained how we got together. So the whole documentary is about how we got together to create the free organization, etc. So that will be in the future. I'm not sure when all of that will come out. You just do it and you don't know what will happen. But the great thing for me is that there's so much coming out now, showing contacts, people sharing their experiences and what have you. And it's no longer being ridiculed by mainstream. I've noticed more and more when I talk to the media that there is a lot more respect when you talk to them now. There's less of this sniggering in the background and whatever. It's like people are getting the message that this is a reality, and even mainstream are finding it harder. Before we end, I will say this. It was funny. I was doing many years ago now, and I was in Australia, in Western Australia, and they were doing a short piece for one of these news shows. And I actually started talking about what people experience and what have you, and how they feel.
I think I saw that.
Well, it was on one of the news ones. And what happened was the lady that was doing the audio got so freaked out, she had to leave and go and sit in the kitchen because it freaked her out and what have you. And then when I was talking, one of the other guys was looking really uncomfortable and what have you. And afterwards I said, "You've had experiences, haven't you?" And he said, and they did a very credible piece, because actually it really resonated with a couple of them, and they were realizing that perhaps this was actually real. And I find that quite, in a way, quite amusing, because I'll deliberately come out with, they'll feel this, they'll feel this, and I look at the interviewer and I'm watching their face and I'm seeing, is that hitting home? And sometimes it's like they start to look at you and I'm thinking, got you, there's another one. Got you, now there's another one. So people are waking up, and that's the exciting thing.
And that's no accident. The people we meet along the way, you know, whether it's the guy at the bus stop or the person interviewing us, we've met them for a reason. And sometimes it is, well, it mostly is to wake them up. So you were definitely there for a reason. Is there anything else you'd like to promote, Mary? Anything else?
Well, if everything on the planet works out as and evolves back to semi-normal, I am going back to the US, and I'll be speaking at the Contact in the Desert in early June. I'm also, believe it or not, agreed to do a cruise, Ancient Aliens cruise.
Oh, wow.
In March. I'm going to be one of the presenters in next March. Wow. One of the presenters. So we're going to go down and visit ancient sites, and I'm going to do a workshop for those that are.
God, that's amazing.
So there'll be all sorts of others like myself, you know, that are talking at various levels. So that's next March. So
that's amazing.
Florida.
So
it'll be going from Cape Canaveral, actually, I think, is where the boat, the ship leaves. And we don't know, it's a week, and we're going to ancient sites. I'll be doing workshops on expanding consciousness and awareness and whatever, and we'll all be doing a presentation. So I don't know about all the other presenters yet, but that's next year.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah, I've got goosebumps. Yeah, I have. That's pretty amazing.
Okay.
So for anyone that would like to get in touch with me, I do readings. I've got a waiting list at the moment of about a month or so, give or take about a month. I'm also starting to do Pleiadian teachings online. and Pleiadian channeling online. So that's going to be on Zoom. That's going to be like group sessions and individual sessions. And I've also started to do a show that's based in Australia, called Love Angels Light, with Eileen Roslin. I don't think I'm pronouncing her name right. Rosal, thanks. So yeah, that's going to be, the next one is I think it's at the beginning of June. So if anyone would like readings or Pleiadian initiations and activations, I'm also going to start doing that. So I've got a lot of stuff coming up. If you want to check out any of my stuff, have a look on my website. I haven't actually had a chance to put a lot of the information and advertise it yet. So if you're interested in anything that I've said and you don't see the links or anything, then just email me. My email is on my website, which is thepleiadianchild.com. Can you think of anything else, Mary, that we need to say?
No, I think we've given, hopefully, those that are listening something to really look at and explore for themselves. And all I say to people is, don't take my word for it. Start looking into it for yourself and make up your own mind, because that's the most important of all. Yeah,
definitely. I think, for people that think this is conspiracy theories, and it's just cracked and crazy, they should go away and look at it themselves, because when you do start researching this stuff, it unfolds for you, and you actually become to find out the truth and the research behind it, which will actually change your life and give you a whole different perspective and put you onto a different path. So beware that if you do start to go away and research stuff, be open to what you discover and what you find out, because we have been lied to en masse. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and see you all soon. Mary, if you stay on the line and for a few minutes, and then I'll just end this here. So thanks everyone for watching.
Goodbye.
Okay, I'm having a few technical difficulties.